Hey, you awesome folks! Thanks for taking this journey of discovery with your guide, Keith Haney. You're listening to the Becoming Bridge Builders podcast, your favorite podcast for everything from racial reconciliation to education innovation, justice reform, and leading change in the 21st century. This podcast is for people who love to be challenged with difficult topics, but want practical solutions to solve these challenging issues. Becoming Bridge Builders makes change possible. Each week on the podcast, Keith invites innovative thought leaders to share how they are building bridges in their area of expertise. You will hear breakthrough ideas and concepts that are changing the world. He's featuring guests who are best-selling authors, leaders at Microsoft, entrepreneurs, leading educators, professors, lawyers, and so many more. Listen in to learn how you can be the bridge to the change you are seeking.
My guest today is a prolific business leader and public servant, Ronald Simmons. He invites you to leave the ordinary behind and glide into a richly meaningful life that you were intended to live. From his humble beginnings in the rural South to the heights of influence as an entrepreneur, finance executive, and three-term member of the Texas House of Representatives, Ron has mined the depths of his trials and travails to provide a wealth of applicable insights. Whether you're out front, holding the wagon's handle, shifting direction from inside, or riding along as a cargo, or pushing from the rear, the place you occupy will set your course toward more of the same or a bold new adventure. We welcome Ron to the podcast. Well, it's so good to have Ron on today. How you doing today, Ron?
Oh, Keith, I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Oh, I can't complain. Two people from Baton Rouge together on one podcast. It's got to be electric.
Well, it's going to be something, that's for sure. Now, maybe hopefully we've lost some of our Southern Louisiana accent that people will be able to understand us, right?
If not, we'll probably morph into it, and those who are from the South will get it. Those who are not, unfortunate for them.
That is true. That's true. I tell you what, I don't know how it is in Iowa, but it is hard to get really, really good Cajun cooking in the Dallas area. In Houston, you can get it, but Dallas, it's much harder. And I miss that. I
do too. It is hard to get good Cajun cooking anywhere outside of Louisiana.
That's true. That's fair. That's a good point.
But I'm afraid to go home because when I go home, then I just overdo it. And I overdose on Cajun food. So I have to I have to monitor myself.
That's true. I get that. I do.
I love to ask my guests this question. What's the best piece of advice you ever received?
Well, I think the best piece of advice, and there's been a lot of them, of course. So, but the thing that comes to me as you ask that is a good pastor friend of mine, Dr. O.S. Hawkins, told me one time we were talking about, I was a deacon at First Baptist Dallas for a while when he was pastor there. And we were just talking about how things in society were changing. And this is 20 years ago. And so it should change that much more since then, right?
Definitely.
And what OS said, and this really goes into a lot of areas, not just in the church, but it says, Ron, you have to be flexible with your methods, but never change your message. And I think that's a good point that we all need to remember. I know I thought about that even in my own business context and in the political world I was in for a while. And I think that's a good piece of advice that we can carry, is that it's okay if you want to use television to reach out people for the kingdom. All right. But that message on television needs to be the same as it is in the church, right? That the gospel is the gospel, right? Or my business is my business. I don't need to keep changing my message all the time because that creates confusion.
Yeah, nobody likes squishy core values, right?
No, that's for sure. Nobody does. That's right.
I read your opening, but I kind of want you to kind of walk us through your journey because everybody has a unique pathway. And I'm curious if you'll share with us what your personal journey was.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to do that. And again, if I go too long, just stop me and we'll go from there. But I don't think I will. I was born in Baton Rouge, and my mom and dad were the first in each family to go to college. They went to Louisiana College in Alexandria, Louisiana, which is in the central part of the state, and that's where they met. And my dad was a music major and my mom was an education major. So when they got out of college, he kind of went bivocational, where he taught band in high school level, but he also almost always had a church job as well, where he was leading the music. Now they call them worship leaders. Now we called them ministers of music back then, but you understand what I'm saying.
Right.
He was the singer guy, right? And my mom was a elementary education teacher. And we had, I have an older brother and a younger sister and a younger brother. So there's four of us. And if you know anything about Louisiana, and then we moved to Arkansas. Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi have the lowest paid teachers in the country. It's been that way for a long time, and I don't think it's changed much since then. Maybe there's a couple of other states that have taken over those bottom spots, but so we didn't make much money. And they got paid once a month. And I was kind of a middle child, right? I mean, I had an older brother, a younger sister who was the only girl, then a younger brother. And so I think middle children look at the world a little differently. I always had an extra need to succeed, or an extra drive that I think was different. Not that my brothers and sister didn't have that on their own, but it was just different, right? And I wasn't really a music person. I just don't have the talent that all the rest of my family does. A lot of times I wonder if I got switched at birth sometimes, So I sought to make my difference, in sports and other things. And I wasn't a great athlete. I tell people that I'm really just slightly above average in almost everything. I'm not really awful at anything, but I'm not great at anything either. And but I think that drive is what kind of helped me to always kind of be looking out for the next opportunity, whether that was in high school. And there's a story in my book about that I was playing high school football, and we were having these line drills where you have two lines cross from each other. And then when you get to the end, you're going to meet that person in the middle in a tackling drill, right? When I'm going to have the ball, you're going to be the tackler. Well, it just so happened in my junior year of 2-a-day practices, I end up coming up to that front just by happenstance against our top running back. And I'm about 160 pounds at the time. He was about 220 and no fat at all, right? I mean, this guy, Eddie Malone, I'll never forget Eddie. The guy was incredible. But here we are. We're going to meet in the middle, no blockers. And so I don't know if Eddie was only running half speed or not, because he thought he could probably run over me. But I literally made the best tackle of my life right then. And the head coach right then picked me up kind of by the back of my jersey and said, "This is going to be my starting middle linebacker right here." And I will tell you something, Keith, as simple as that seems in a small high school in a small town in Arkansas, that one statement gave me the confidence that I have drawn on many, many, many times, because I was the underdog, right? Shouldn't have done well at that. And again, maybe he was only running half speed.
Right.
My memory says he was at full speed, but I don't know. And so, but that confidence and that gave me also something where I stood out different from other people in my family, that I was in sports. I was a starter. I had some success in that, and not beyond high school, but I had some success in that. Had a couple of offers from small colleges, and I didn't do that. I tore my ACL my senior year.
Wow.
In high school as well. So that right there wasn't very much fun. But around that time that happened for me on the football field, my mom and dad were going through a divorce. And so our family was upheaval. We lived in a small town, so everybody knows your business in a small town,
Sure,
as you know.
Yep.
And so there was some embarrassment there as well. Because even back then in a small town, not many people got divorces. It just didn't happen. This was in the mid to late 70s in a small town, Arkansas, Louisiana. People stayed together no matter what. But my mom and dad got a divorce, and that kind of left all of us kids in a little bit of a, where are we? What are we doing? I was only a year away from graduating high school. And so I ended up right after high school just kind of going out on my own. My dad had moved out. My mom had actually moved back to Baton Rouge to be closer to her family, some support network, because I had a younger sister and a younger brother that had still several years left in high school. My older brother was off in college at Louisiana Tech. And so I decided I was going to stay behind and go out on my own. And that's what I did. And it really, obviously was challenging, but it was something that, and I had drifted away from my faith at that time, because I was mad at everybody. I'm mad at the world. I'm mad at my dad. I'm mad at my mom. I'm mad at everybody.
Sure.
And, but I will tell you, it was a time that the only father I had was the Heavenly Father. And he was using that time, and little did I know it then. I look back on it now. He was using that time to shape me and mold me, discipline me a little bit, have some hard knocks. But he also used that time to call me back to him. And, I went to junior college, lived with a buddy, worked full time while I was going to college. But that's where I met my wife, Lisa, who has always had a strong faith. And through her, not through anything she said, Keith, but just through her actions, brought me back to the faith. And I believe God obviously had a plan for all of that. Now, again, we didn't have any money. There was nothing about me that said, you know what, one day, big boy, you're going to be successful in business. You're going to be an elected official. There's nothing.
Right.
And one of the reasons I wrote the book was I think there are a lot of me out there, right? I wasn't born with what Steve Jobs had or Mark Cuban or Tiger Woods or anybody of those. There's lots of people like me. And I wanted to give people a little bit of a story, but guidebook on how I think anybody, okay, if they just are willing to do some very uncomfortable things and move forward, that they can have tremendous influence. I'm not saying they're going to make a lot of money or whatever, but I do think they can have outsized influence. And that's really what it's all about. How can I have an influence outside of just me? How does that happen? And so anyway, went on from there and got a job at a local company there. That was a pretty big company called Murphy Oil. I worked in the mailroom, started from the bottom, got some promotions, looked up one day and said, you know what? My last name is not Murphy. So there is a limit.
How far I'm going to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And Lisa and I had 2 kids at the time. We decided to look for a job in a bigger city, a little bit more opportunity. And that's when we got to Dallas. We didn't know one person in Dallas, did not have any contact over there, but we did get a job. I got a job at a bank over there. We ended up, my family, I don't know if your church is a particular denomination or not. My family's been Baptist for 300 years. Right?
Oh, wow.
Literally 300 years. My family's been here for 400 years, but we've been Baptist for 300 years. And so if you grew up Southern Baptist, being able to go to church at First Baptist Dallas was like, literally you might be able to step from there right into heaven. I wasn't sure, but you might be able to, right? And so I told Lisa, we're going to go to First Baptist Dallas. And of course, she had grown up in a little bitty church, maybe 100 people in there. And she, oh, no way we can do that. But we did it. And how the Lord works is he put us in a small, what we would call then Sunday school class or Bible fellowship class of people about our age. That it's the truth, Keith, that several of those couples are now almost 40-year friends of ours. In fact, we're having dinner with one of them tonight that was in that class 40 years ago.
Wow.
And it was God saying, this is your home. My wife's mom had just passed away at a very early age in her 40s. And so, and of course, my mom and dad had, gone through what they gone through, and that situation wasn't healed yet. So it was really a great blessing. And that's where I made most of my business contacts as well, which I didn't know that I would. So, and I can tell you more about that if you want to, or if you want to stop and talk some different, then we can do that.
No, that's great. It's interesting because I started out Baptist and became Lutheran. So I'm actually Lutheran, which is even more rare in the South.
Yes, it is. That's right.
But you're right. Part of the culture of the South, especially, is you do make those connections in a Christian church setting oftentimes. And those lifelong friends can be springboards to not just business, but just that connection again with God, and to be there in those tough times, and have that foundation to kind of walk you through those difficult times. You mentioned, losing your mother-in-law at an early age, how having that strong foundation is so important. I'm curious to know, as you think back to your journey when you were kind of after your mom and dad separated, what lessons did you learn during that time of struggle that have served you well going forward?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the two or three lessons, but one of the main lessons that I learned, and I think we do learn things, and I think our kids do too, from our parents' mistakes, things that we see. And I learned what commitment needed to look like, because what I saw is what it didn't need to look like. And I think that through, all marriages have ups and downs, but I think that through Lisa and I's marriage, never once, not one time ever, I can't speak for her, okay? But for me, I never once have considered, divorce or leaving or anything. Not one. That was not going to be part of the equation. They may take me out in a pine box, but that was going to be the way they took me out. And so I think commitment was one of those lessons I learned. And that carried over not only, I think, because the relationship with my dad especially, and it's pretty good now, but it was shattered. I've been much more intentional on my relationships, right? Much more committed. And I also think, in some ways, there were some that I didn't learn, some lessons that I wish I would have learned, because I didn't really know how to be the father that I probably needed to be for my kids, because the example I had so many ups and downs in it. And I certainly, as my kids got to be the age was when my parents divorced, and so my dad was more out of the picture, I didn't know what to do. I had never had a dad that I could go to when I was 18 years old. So when my son got 18, I mean, again, I had to rely as much as I could, on what I felt the Heavenly Father was guiding me to do. And that was something, that was a lesson that I didn't want my kids to have to experience, right? I want my son, my oldest, who has now 3 boys, one of them's 12 years old, that through every stage of that 12-year-old's life, Justin will at least have an example that he had to look on and say, hey, I'm going to mirror that. Or, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to adjust that a little bit. Maybe dad didn't exactly have it right in the way I see it. And so I think those are lessons that are just totally invaluable. I think the other thing that I learned through that is, in a sense, from a totally earthly standpoint, if it is to be, it's up to me. In other words, I was going to have to do the work.
Right.
I didn't have anything to fall back on. If you don't have a plan B, then you really get focused on your plan A. And that's all I had.
I love that. We share kind of a common theme in that my father wasn't there either. And so my goal was to be a better father to my kids than my father was to me. The funny thing is, I always felt that I wasn't as good a father as I could have been. I think we all have that sense. Yeah. And then one day my son said to me, my goal, Dad, is to be as half a good a father as you are. And it kind of touches your heart when your kids.
Oh man, I would have been bawling on that.
I had to hang up the phone because I can't.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
But so you do value that, knowing that you are that important. And so for all fathers who are listening, I would encourage you, please be involved in your kid's life, because you have way more influence than you possibly can realize in your kids' lives.
Yeah, that is true. And no matter where you screwed up in the past, it's never too late.
Right.
Never too late to go back and say you're sorry, or that, hey, I could have done that better, and try to start afresh. There's nothing wrong with doing that.
I remember writing a blog once about the Cat in the Cradle song. You remember that song? I say, don't be that father.
For sure.
Don't be that father.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I had, during my business career, I traveled a lot as we started our own business, and you know what, as I think about it in my mind, I think I was gone a lot, and I was, but my oldest son kind of did a similar thing that your son did, because I talk about that sometimes in talks that I give about being gone a lot, and Justin said, you know what, Dad, I know you were gone a lot, but I don't ever remember you missing anything that was important to me. And that made me feel good, because I thought that that's the way he felt. Then all of that extra effort of catching the early flight or the overnight flight or whatever it was to do that meant something to him. So that was really important.
It's important. Let's talk about your book, because I really love to get into that. You have a book entitled Life Lessons from the Little Red Wagon, 15 Ways to Take Charge and Create a Path to Success. What led you to write that book?
Well, as I said a little bit earlier, part of what led me was I believe that I was an average person, okay? And there are a lot of average, what I would consider average people out there just going through a normal life like you and I have gone through, that there's a lot more in them that they can accomplish and people they can influence. And so what my goal was is that no matter where people were in their lives, that this would, watching my journey, which there's nothing in there that you look at that so people would say, well, there's no way I could ever do that. Right.
Right.
Now, some of it's uncomfortable, like leaving your home of where you grew up and moving to a city where you didn't know anybody. But I'm telling you, if you think you're going to get wherever it is you're going to go with taking nothing but comfortable steps, it's not going to happen. And so I began as I guess as I get to this stage, I'm 63 years old now. You kind of look back over your life and you think about, okay, what does all of that mean? And one of the things that I wanted to do, Keith, was to be able to leave something in the written word that my kids, grandkids, great grandkids, generations would fall back on and say, okay, this is who that old man was, right? I don't remember much about him, but this is who he was. And then also maybe that could translate to another contemporary of mine that they could do the same thing. And I use the wagon metaphor because most of us had some type of wagon.
Right.
The radio flyer wagon is probably one of the most popular toys of all time. In fact, my grandkids today have one. And when I got thinking about the wagon, the different parts, because it's a very simple machine, right? You got a handle, you got front wheels, back wheels, and you got this thing that carries everything, the cargo, right?
Right.
And I began to think about, you know what, that's like life, right? And at different times of our life and in different areas of our life, we represent different parts of that wagon. Sometimes, one of the biggest mistakes I see people make, Keith, is that we always want to be the one holding the handle. In other words, we want to be out front. And that's part of some of that's, I'm not just saying it's guys, but that is kind of that, the Lord made us to be able to be protectors and leaders of our family and those types of things. So we believe that in every situation we need to have the handle.
Right.
And I had to learn through pain sometimes that that's just not true. Sometimes you have to be the cargo.
Yeah.
Or sometimes maybe you're just the wheels, right? You're following somebody else, but you're working your tail off, right? And so what I encourage people is look at all the different key areas of your life and put the wagon in each of those and really be honest with yourself and say, hey, where should I be in this particular wagon? When I got into public service, I didn't know anything about politics or any of that stuff. And so I had to crawl inside the wagon at first and have other people pull me along, showing me the path. And then I could get out and I could be the wheel. I could help push, but I still didn't really know anything. I certainly wasn't fit to lead. And then eventually, okay, as I got more experience, I could lead and hopefully help other people do the same thing. So that's kind of what I'm talking about in there. And that's what inspired me to do it. And I hope it, we've got a great response on it. So I hope that people will use it as kind of a little bit of a guidebook and also realize some of the stories are funny, but to realize that, you know what, you don't think because you weren't born with the brain like Steve Jobs or, money like Donald Trump, or shoot a basketball like Michael Jordan, that you can't have tremendous, tremendous influence, because you can.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
And now a word from one of our sponsors, For Freedom Mobile. If you're using AT&T, Verizon, or T-Mobile, then you're being tracked. Mobile providers collect your location, communications, internet activity, even your financial transaction. They sell that data to anyone willing to pay for it and provide it to the government without a warrant. Switch to For Freedom Mobile, and you won't ever have to worry about Big Tech or Big Brother tracking you through your mobile phone again. For Freedom Mobile provides secure, unlimited talk, text, and high-speed data for just $29.99 a month, and it includes free internet roaming in over 200 countries. Sign up for the service by visiting forfreedommobile.com and using the promo code BRIDGEBUILDERS to get your first month for only $9.99. See forfreedommobile.com for details, just like the number 4, freedommobile.com. Something you said reminds me of when I was at seminary and a pastor in a congregation is you don't know what place you are in the wagon. But in order to really appreciate that you're someplace in the wagon, you have to flourish where you're planted. And whether you're in the wagon, in the cart part, whether you're the wheel or whether you're pushing from behind, you have to learn to appreciate the place you are at that stage in your life. Or even in that stage, you can't be as effective as you could be if you learn to flourish where you're planted.
That's a great word there, Keith, because that's true. Because a lot of times all we're doing is looking to get a hold of the handle.
Right.
And to be the person out front. And sometimes that's, not, I was talking to somebody, I forget who it was. Sometimes things aren't about us.
Yeah.
We tend to think everything that happens around us is about us. And sometimes it's not about us. My daughter is Allie Beth Stuckey, and she has a pretty famous podcast called Relatable that her audience is primarily young women. And some of the messages she gets from people are just incredible, and how much she has been an encouragement to them. And I told Allie that we have to look at our walk and what we're doing, is because sometimes, I'm sure you feel this way, Keith, you don't know if it's touching somebody or not. Right.
Exactly.
You hope it is. But I just tell her our number one thing between she and I is fishes and loaves. That's all we're doing, is we're fishes and loaves people. And God is the multiplier of whatever that happens to be. And whether that's, and I think you can be that way in business, in your relationships, in your finances, all of that comes together. I mean, I believe all of that comes together, and that no matter, just because somebody doesn't make a lot of money doesn't mean they can't be a blessing with their finances. What I mean by that, a blessing on how they use their finances. How do they do that, right? And the same way in everything else that we do.
I love that. Your other chapter 6 kind of stuck with me because I love that idea of the fear of failure. One of the blessings in my life is my wife. And whenever I'm about to take a leap of something that maybe I could fail at, she always is that place. She says, you got to try it. You got to go do it. And she encourages me to take a chance. And I thank her, because even as I'm afraid sometimes to make that leap, she's like, you won't know until you try. And so oftentimes the fear of failure stops us from being in the place where God has us to go in life, or where we could be. So for people out there who like to play it safe, what advice do you have for the play it safe people?
Yeah, well, I would ask them to write down this acrostic, FEAR, and just write this down. And when they have fear, to look at it, because it just means false evidence appearing real, right?
Oh, I like that.
FEAR. So false evidence appearing real. Most fear, we fear things that will never happen, right? Or have a very, very, very small chance of happening. And that stops us. And I believe that the evil one is a big part of that, right? That's how if you read much C.S. Lewis, you understand in his explanations of how Satan works, it's a lot like that. It's a work on fear of you're never going to be that good, all that type of stuff. What I've tried to do in my life And what I've tried to teach my kids to do and other people that I may have influence over is to take the next uncomfortable step. Okay. Take the next uncomfortable step. And we almost always know what that is, right? You know what it is, either making that phone call of that, of that big potential client that you've been afraid of, or if you're in the ministry, making that bold step to sit down with maybe one of your elders in your church that you really need to have a serious conversation about, but there are consequences to that, right? But being able to do that, because I believe that God honors righteous action. If we praying about it and God's given us this ability to think and to do and whatever, and there's not confusion, but just fear. There's difference between confusion and fear, right? Like God is not the author of confusion, but I do believe that sometimes he allows our hesitancy to make us think about it properly and pray on it, whatever. But I also believe that even if I take an action, I guess I always have believed this, even if I took an action and I had done everything I could to kind of prepare for that, I took that action and it didn't work out, I always have learned something from that. And I'll tell you what else I found, Keith. Many, many times there's a blessing on the other side of that I never, ever anticipated. And a good story on that is if people understand and reading the book, I lost my last election. I was running for a fourth term and got beat through some interesting circumstances, but I got beat. And that was very difficult for me to swallow. I did not plan on that, didn't want that, but it did show me a couple of things. Okay. It showed me that I had put too much emphasis on being elected at the time, and that I became very disappointed that I was so disappointed. That's what bothered me. Okay. But I will tell you that once kind of God and I had our conversation about all that, not always nice, but we get in our private area. It's okay. He sits there just like we do our own kids. And, at the end of the day, we may have a discussion, but he loves on us, right? And he loved on me. And little did I know there was a blessing on the other side of that, where I was appointed by the governor of Texas to fulfill a pretty important role that was an elected role. It was an appointed role. And I've been doing that now for about 4 years, and it's been just a tremendous blessing. I mean, it really, really has. And it doesn't take near as much of my time as all the other stuff did. So you just never know. I just encourage people to please just take that next step. And if you've got an encourager in your life, like your wife, what a blessing that is, right?
Yeah.
What a blessing. And just take the step, and you almost never regret that. Even if it doesn't work exactly how you want it to, you will have learned something. You'll have met somebody that maybe you wouldn't have met otherwise. Just take that step.
It's funny, having lost 3 elections. There
you go, the trifecta.
The trifecta. But the first one I lost, I remember thinking, wow, the night before, God told me I wasn't going to win. And so I had this great sense of peace. But then afterwards, there was a struggle, because I kept going, well, how did I lose?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't for me. It would have been a bad thing for me to win. Mm-hmm. But it was still hard to lose. I'm one of those people who my wife knows and my kids all know, when we play any game, I don't want to lose. I do not like losing. I think losing is a horrible, horrible trait. And so I don't want to get it to the habit of it. Yeah. And so I was more concerned about the fact that I lost and whether or not it was good for me. Mm-hmm. And it took a long time to get over the fact that it wasn't good for you. This would not have been a good situation for you to be in. And so God saved you from that. But even knowing all that is still hard sometimes. So you're right. We have to understand that God does things in our life for reasons, and be able to have that conversation with him when we say, God, I don't get this. Why did you do this? And kind of like the psalmist does, fight back with God and let God answer you. But I always tell, be careful that Job moment when he actually does answer you.
Yeah. Well, isn't that the truth? Yeah. Hello. And sometimes sometimes the answer is not clear immediately. Or in fact, a lot of times for me, because, most of the time, I'm sure when you went into that election, you went in it with all the right ideas and the right reasons and all that. So you're thinking, okay, look, what else am I supposed to do? Well, there was nothing else you're supposed to do. That it was part of his plan for you to run. It wasn't part of his plan for you to win.
Right.
Because he had additional plans other than that. And that was the way, obviously that's the way it ended up with me as well.
Yeah, I love that. Chapter 9 is important too, because you talk about mentors. And I'm curious for you, who were some mentors in your life that served to inspire you?
Yeah. Well, and they've changed over time. And my approach to mentors sometimes might be considered a little different than others. I believe that you have to have a mentor in different areas of your life. Like my spiritual mentor, is not necessarily going to be my financial mentor, right? And they could be, but they're not necessarily going to be. So I want to seek out mentors. And again, mentors don't come to you. You got to go to them, right? And remember that also is that there are times too in my life where I think, man, I could really mentor that young man and probably help. But if I push myself on that, it's not going to work, because when the student is ready, the teacher appears, but it doesn't happen before that. But for me, one of the main mentors in my life that it's my go-to person probably for the last almost 20 years now is John Maxwell, the author. In fact, he wrote the foreword in my book, and I've had the blessing to be able to get to know him, and he and I have some pretty good, interesting conversations a couple of times a year. But that's been very helpful. And also in my spiritual life, Dr. Hawkins has been very, very helpful in that area for me. And I've had several different financial people. On the financial side, I always try to find somebody who will make me uncomfortable because they're so financially successful. Okay. And that, at some points in my life, that meant they were making 30,000 when I was making 20,000. Right.
Right.
And so it doesn't have to be a billionaire, but I mean, someone that there is a clear difference between them and myself because I can learn from them. If I just hang around people from a mentor standpoint that have about the same as me or look the same as me or have had the same experiences as I, those are good for relationships. Okay. Because we can share things, and I can learn from that, but I can't get guidance from that, right? I can't really get, okay, Ron, I've been through that 4 years ago, something similar. This is kind of the way I looked at it. This is kind of what happened to me. So, and again, for men, pride keeps us from having and seeking out mentors. And I would just encourage you to put that pride in the back seat. And sometimes when you've had to lead a lot of things in your life, it actually feels pretty good to have somebody else sitting there feeding into you, and that actually, you can't fill your cup when you're constantly pouring out, whatever that is.
Right.
You can only get your cup filled by somebody pouring into you in one way or another.
Well, next time you talk to John, tell him that he was one of the mentors I had when I was a young pastor, even though he didn't know me, because I came out of ministry and I walked into a congregation. And they said, we need a leader. And I'm like, I don't know how to lead. That wasn't something they taught us at seminary. So he was the first person I went to every workshop I could get to in the area to learn from him how to lead. So you tell him thank you from me next time you talk.
I will do that. I will see him next week, as a matter of fact, and I will tell him that's really good. That'll warm his heart, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And that's influence, right?
It is.
That's influence. So you don't know he doesn't know he influenced you probably one way or the other. Right. But think about the influence that had on you and now what that's had on others.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we have to do right there.
Because I took his books and it was how I trained my church leadership. Before we started our meeting, we spent 30 minutes with his videos learning the 21 irrefutable laws. So,
there's no question.
Yeah, we grew a lot because of that. So it was very exciting.
My favorite book of his, because it related to me so much, was called Thinking for a Change. And what that book is about, because when we're, if we're kind of what I would call a type A personality, you got a lot on your plate, you got kids, you got family, you got business, all that, you go. and you rarely take time to just sit back and think, especially with all the technology and our phones with us all the time. And I remember when I was going through, I had gotten to a point in my business where I had not needed to be there every day.
Sure.
Had other partners that were doing the day to day. And so it was kind of an inflection point, almost like that book, Halftime. And I was talking to John about it. He said, Ron, how much time do you take just thinking every day? And I said, well, I know I'm thinking all the time. I got stuff on my mind all the time. I said, no. When everything else is, we don't have any other thing, that you're just sitting there to think. And boy, I started doing that, Keith. And that, even if it's 20 minutes, right? Or not even every day, but just where everything else is on, all you're doing is think. It's amazing how your mind will come up with solutions or ideas or thoughts or whatever when you take the time to sit back and do that. And that's been a big impact on me.
Yeah, I would take a day every week where I would go to my favorite restaurant. I would order something, and I would just sit there and I would think for the morning.
Man,
I'd take a pad along, a legal pad, and whatever ideas came up, I'd write them down. Wouldn't vet them. I just wrote them down.
Yeah, just write them down. Oh, yeah, that's very smart.
And
that's
then later on, I go back, that was a really silly idea. That was too much coffee that time or something.
Yeah, that's right. Of course. Yeah. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Why would I think of that?
Yeah. So it was. I got that from him too, I believe. So, and I like to think
that's true.
He said about leaders go before, and that was always important too. It's like you can't take people someplace you've never been. So
you can't. No. That's one of the levels of leadership. Go through being a producer, right? In order for you to influence others, you have to be a producer yourself, in whatever field that is. You have to be able to be a producer. So that is very, very important, because people know if you're not, right. I'll never forget. I had a boss one time come in, and I was probably in my mid-20s, and I'll never forget. He had me and another guy come in his office, and he had been kind of brought in. He didn't kind of come up through the ranks. He'd been brought in, above us. And he said, I'll never forget him saying, I haven't earned your respect, but I demand your respect. And I thought, I'm not going to say anything because I need to feed my family, but I'm thinking, I don't think that's the way you're supposed to do that, right?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, it didn't last long.
Like, here's a book to read.
Yeah, right. That's what I wanted to say, but yeah, that would have probably been a little bit arrogant.
So I'm curious, what's the most exciting thing happening in your life this season?
Oh, that's a good question. I've learned some things about me. Okay. I don't think that I am someone who will, one time I think most people do is, okay, I'm going to work, I'm going to get this. I've sold up my business, financially, Lisa and I are pretty secure. I thought, okay, I'm just going to cash it in, right? I'm just going to play golf every day or whatever. And I've learned that that's not the plan for me, right? So I'm going to be engaged in something all the time, whether it's what the governor's appointed me to or other things that like the book. I didn't know I was going to do the book either, doing that. And if you've written a book, that's a long effort, that's for sure. But I think for me right now, and my wife and I talk about this quite a bit, is I want to try to help my kids. Okay. And I got 3 kids. I got a older son who is an assistant U.S. attorney, works for the Department of Justice in San Antonio. They have 3 little boys. I have a next son who lives with us, is on the autism spectrum, but pretty self-help. He can do
high
most
functioning.
Of it himself, but he pretty high function. Yeah. And then I have a daughter, Allie Beth, who is in her early 30s, and 3 little girls, and she's married and all that. She had this podcast that's doing really, really well. But what Lisa and I want to do is I want to continue feeding into them to see how can they, if Lisa and I started down here, okay, in influence, and then we've got to here, let's say, I want our kids to start here and take that out here, so that their influence for the kingdom and for the other all the things that come under that is greater. And how can I be helpful to that? Not how can I tell them what to do, but how can I be helpful? Today, how I could be helpful. This is just as simple as it is. Today, how I was helpful to our daughter. They have 3 little ones, and she and her husband both work, and she has to go into the studio and do her recording for a podcast. And it takes a few hours to do that each for 3 days a week. And they didn't have anybody keep the little baby today. The older 2 are in preschool, but they didn't keep the baby. So what I did this morning is I sat there with a 2-month-old and held that baby and played with that baby and fed that baby. And that's what you do. That's how I could, because that way my daughter didn't have to worry about that.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's how can Lisa and I feed into our kids and grandkids so that they can take what we've started and exponentially grow that. That's what I'm the most excited about today.
I love that. So Ron, as you think about the end and when things are moved on, what do you want your legacy to be?
Yeah, I want my legacy to be that he left no stone unturned in each area of my life, that I did not. It doesn't mean I got to do everything I wanted to do or go every place I wanted to go, but in the things he was engaged in, he left no stone unturned. That's what I would like to be.
I love it. Anything I haven't asked you that I should have asked you?
Where can you get my book? That's a good one.
All right. So where can we find your book?
Here we go. Yeah. So this is the book right here, and you can get it really anywhere. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Ron at ronsimmons.com. Happy to get that to you. The interesting thing though about this book is that if you ever do Audible books, which I do a lot of Audible, I listen to a lot of books.
I love Audible books.
Audible. Yeah. All right. Well, I read the book. Okay. So it's my voice on there, and I'm the only person, I think, in the history of mankind, to have myself plus John Maxwell and Ronald Reagan reading a part of the book.
Oh, wow. Ronald Reagan. How'd you pull that off?
So that's going to be very interesting. Right. And I don't believe in seances, so I wasn't talking from the past,
okay.
but it's a real deal, and it's very, very good. It's interesting, but no, I'm happy to, if people get the book and they read it and they have questions or they want to talk about something or communicate on something, you can reach out to me. I mean, my email is simple, just my name, Ron at ronsimmons.com. And I'm happy to visit with them, give them my thoughts on something. I've had several people email me with, hey, I'm going through this right now. What's your idea on this, that type of thing. So, I will tell you just one last little story. When I got into business for myself and with other partners, but kind of was one of the part ownership, what we thought we were going to do, which was a pretty good idea, was nothing where we ended up doing. And so sometimes I believe that you have to have flexibility in what your plans, goals are put in stone, plans should be in sand. We started our investment company thinking we were going to work with small company retirement plans, plans that didn't really have much interest by the big investment firms, right? They wanted to deal with the big world. And that's what we were going to do. And we thought there was an underserved market, and there was, except for we had one meeting with the head of the investments at American Airlines, because they had set up some investment products that other people could utilize. We had one meeting with them, and we were going to utilize their investment products for our small company clients that we didn't have any of, but we were going to go get them.
Right.
And in that meeting, the head of that, who's still a friend of mine today, said, Ron, we got 3 or 4 of our retired pilots that would like to do business with us, but we are not really set up to work with or invest money for individuals. We only work with big, companies or companies like yourself. And they said, would you talk to them, and maybe you can guide them through what they need to do with their money. And if they want to utilize our products, they can do it through you guys. Right. And I was like, yeah, in my mind, I'm thinking that's really not what we're trying to do, but I'll do it as a favor.
Right.
So he gave me 4 names, and I go talk to the first guy, and I'll never forget that day. Changed my life. I talked to this guy, and he said, "Hey, you know, when pilots retired at the time, Keith, they got all of their retirement in one check."
Wow.
One lump sum, not a monthly deal, but one lump sum. And they did roll it to an IRA to avoid taxes. But somebody still needed to invest it for them. Who was going to decide what stocks and bonds to buy? And that's what this group from American could do. They had a group set up to do that. And we could be kind of the facilitator to help all that happen. So I told him, yeah, we can do that for you. You know, no problem. We can help you with your estate planning, all those types of things that a retiree might need. And he said, okay, that's great. He said, can you hold on just a second? I got something maybe that you would be interested in. And so I'm sitting there, I'm probably looking at my watch like, okay, you know, I've been out here an hour. I got an hour to drive home. It's Friday. It literally was Friday afternoon. And, you know, your mind's like, okay, I'm out, right? He comes back in there and he brings this list of 1,500 other guys just like him. And so from that moment on, all that we ever did in our company was invest money for retired commercial airline pilots. And from that one meeting, we built that business to where when we sold it in 2019, we managed money for over $3 billion.
Wow.
Over 30 years. And it was just, again, the idea of being on my own and all that was, I knew that's where I needed to be. I thought I needed to be here, but I was, I guess, for whatever reason, was flexible enough to take a look at this. And then it was a God moment, because I'd never been more sure of anything else business wise in my life than that. And that's where we never changed our message, right? A lot of people would come to us and say, well, hey, you're doing this for pilots, do this for other people too. And I said, not until we've talked to every pilot on this earth are we ever going to change that. And that benefited us a lot. So you never know what's going to be out there if you take that next uncomfortable step. So
you appreciate the place where you were in the wagon at the moment, and you took that.
No question about it. You appreciated that. That's where I was.
Right.
That's right. Good point.
Well, Ron, thank you so much for this conversation. It was engaging and it was great to connect with you. And I look forward to having you back on later. It was a fun time talking with you. So blessings on your book.
Thank you, Keith. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And the legacy that you leave behind, and blessings on your daughter's podcast and what you're doing. Because I think what you're doing is valuable. And the book, I'm looking forward to picking up and listening to you and Ronald Reagan and John Maxwell read it to me.
There you go. Yes, that's right. Oh, that'll be good. You'll enjoy that. I promise you.
I will. I'll do it. I'll go on my Audible now. And actually, people who follow my podcast, if you want to get Audible, I have a discount where you can get an Audible through my podcast. So get a discount on that as well. So
great. Good. Well, thank you, Keith, very much.
Blessings.
Thanks for listening to Becoming Bridge Builder. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, please subscribe and share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at @BKeithHaney and on Getter and Twitter @RevHeadpin or on his website at alightbreaksthrough.org. Thanks again, and tune in next time.